Welcome back to another episode. This episode is what I call the zombie episode, and the reason for that, it might be a bit unsettling, is because we're going to be talking about brains, specifically BMO's brain, which is, in this case, you turn away if you're squeamish, but it's a Raspberry Pi Zero, slightly modified Pi Zero, because it's got this little extra 2-pin header on there which you have to solder in, and that's for the TV DAC, so you can use analog instead of HDMI, which is what we use. So assembling this thing is fairly straightforward. We've already printed the back panel and added these inserts, and I'm just taking a vanilla Raspberry Pi Zero and fixing it with these standoffs here, these hex standoffs, and they actually just screw straight through the mounting holes and work as basically screws to hold this thing in. Not terribly complicated, but I do like to torque them down just a little bit. I like to do things hand tight usually, but I want these to stay fairly snug. So I'm going to torque them down a little bit with a driver. Brains installed. So the next thing that's important is this interface board that I may have talked about it before. It's got a lot of things on there: USB hub, the mounting for the analog TV, speaker, servo mounts, you name it, it's on there. So this, just like any sort of Pi board, just goes right on top and snugs right up onto those standoffs. So it just goes straight down on there and then mounts to those standoffs. That's fixed in place with just standard M2.5 screws. I don't want to torque them down completely yet. The reason for that is I have a special connector that needs to go on here. And that connector is this tiny little board here. It's actually a weird looking USB cable, if you want to look at it that way. It's a circuit board with two male micro USB connectors on, and that's because this USB hub has to connect into the USB port of the Pi Zero, and using a cable, you're never going to find a cable that small, and the problem with it is that it takes up too much space with the bend radius and everything. So this just is a very compact USB cable, and it's designed to snap into these two micro connectors, and that's why I didn't torque it all the way down, because I want, if there's a little bit of slop required, I believe it's engineered to fit exactly, and it snaps right in. And now the USB from the Pi Zero goes up into the hub, and these USB ports are now active. So again, you have a full-size USB underneath, a micro for auxiliary needs, I really don't use it, and I have a Pico blade connector which actually goes to an off-board USB connectors. Those are the front panel USB game ports for BMO. And that installs the brains. It's kind of hidden now, so if you're squeamish you can start looking again. You have the Pi Zero with the interface board on, so now we have the powering of BMO, which is done with a battery. And I've shown this before. This is a cool little device called the Power Boost 1000C from Adafruit, and it takes this 3.7 volts, ups it to 5.25 volts, and then outputs it. So, and also it has on-off switch and recharging capabilities, which you're going to make use of. The issue is you need a special cable, and I hate special cables, but there's really no way around it. What I did is I need this header to micro USB to power, which is a different way to get power into a Pi, but I just take a standard USB charging cable, which is different than a data cable because it only has 2 wires and they're thicker, and cut it off and then expose the leads. In this case, after testing, I know the blue lead is negative and the brown is positive. Need to test that because you never know. I've actually had red leads be ground in some of these things. They do weird things inside there on purpose or by mistake. So if you don't know, grab this thing. And you're probably wondering what this is. This is a Raspberry Pi that I reverse voltaged at one point somehow, I believe, and it's dead now and parts of it don't work. But if you power it up, the LEDs will come on. So I usually test with this because I'm not going to destroy any more that's destroyed. But make sure you know which leads do what. In this case, I know that negative is blue and negative is that thing right there. So to attach this, we're just going to use some M 2.5 screws and just give it a fairly loose attachment. It doesn't have to be cranked all the way down. And that is cool. Now if I plug the battery in right now, the light goes on. Why does the light go on? Because it's actually has an on-off switch. So these pins in this header are designed to be connected to a switch to turn that on off. So to do that, I actually need a specialized cable. This is where it gets a little weird. You solder on this header. It comes without this header. There's all kinds of pin headers you can use. I'm actually using a elevated right angle header that is pointing up, which is probably not the direction you'd normally do it. It's also bent, I don't know if you could see that, about 45 degrees, which I just took the header and put the socket on there and just bent it up, which the reason for that is because there's not enough clearance to miss this terminal block. Plus I had to make this special cable. I hate making special cables, but there it is. It's a Pico blade connector to this pin header, 0.1 inch header. There's really no way around it unless they redo this. Putting all these pin headers on where this goes, which is the this back panel connector, putting all the pin headers on there makes this cable exceptionally large, because this here is the problem. There just isn't enough room to get 2 of them in that tight of space, and it looks like there's a lot of room knocking everything over here. Zombie, stay out of the way. Looks like there's a lot of room, but it fills up fast. So I try to use as small connectors as I can, and in this case, that's what I did. So I gotta be a little careful you don't put it on backwards. I made some marks with a pen at which spots have, not all 8 slots are used, only 6 of them are, so which ones are open I made marks, but might be a better way to do that, but these headers get big fast. So again, if I still plug that in, the light goes on because nothing is controlling it. This is an example of a back panel control board, which I already mounted in the main body, but this is a spare. If I put it on here with its connector, if I do it the correct way, not upside down. That's what I like about keyed connectors, by the way. Now if I plug the battery in, the light doesn't go on, and there's no lights on here, but now I can turn it on and off using this switch here. Off, on. And that is a really cool part of that thing. So I give them credit for making it cool. Okay, well let's finish this thing off. Let's put everything together. There's still a couple of things we need to do. Got to put the speakers in. And what we talked about earlier was I put a little bit of adhesive foam on these speakers to keep them in place. I think that helps out a lot. They might hold in place just through friction, but I give it a little extra help. But this is just standard craft foam with carpet tape on it. The temporary carpet tape, not the really thick stuff that will never come off. So this just goes in the indentation there. Not very complicated. Just push it in. Same thing with the other one. Speakers are in. BMO has speakers. Now we have the back panel. We'll put our SD card in. There is no way to put it in once it's closed up. You have to do that and open it up to get to it. So the logical thing here to do is what? Use the longest cables first. So that would be the servo cables, and they go on this servo header here. These are marked, so left is the bottom set, and the signal goes this way. It's marked. The signal would be the yellow wire. So this would be the left servo, left arm, and that just leaves the right arm. The next longest one is probably the microphone cable. And it goes way over here. Tiny little 1mm JST cable. That is just making it there, isn't it? Now the USB front panel cable. That's a Pico blade cable. I prefer those. They're a little bigger. I like the cabling on those. What would go next? This is the back panel buttons. I think we could do that. We're going to have to start folding this up to get to the access we need here now. Let's go. Speaker. Back. These are the front panel button. Now we're going to have to start clamshelling it. Hope you can see this because I barely can. But I'm putting the front panel buttons. That's those guys just got connected. This is the monitor, which plugs into this header. Ta-da! 2 cables left. And that would be, should have made sure that was in the correct spot, but let's go get it. so 2 cables left. We have this. I could have probably made longer. The main cable for the back panel that plugs onto there, onto the power boost, and then the battery cable. So you're probably not going to see this, but I'm going to connect the power boost up to that cable. If you saw the previous zombie episode, we talked about what that was and why it's important. Ta-da! I mean, that's what you can see. There's a lot of stuff. It's just going to get sandwiched in there. And finally, the battery plugs into the power boost. And if I did it correctly, the light shouldn't go on. You can plug the battery in earlier than this, but you know what I'm going to do, guys? I'm going to undo the servos. They're actually in the way. They are in the way of the battery cable. Battery plugged in, out of the way. Left cable goes here. Right cable goes there. Okay, so far so good. Looking pretty sweet. A couple more things we gotta add though. One is there's an HDMI cable which allows us to use the back port HDMI. So if you plug it into a standard monitor, it will boot to that instead. To do that, I have to use the most minimal HDMI cable I can come up with. This is a little adapter, again, I got off of Adafruit, that and this cable it's an HDMI FPC cable, and it's not ideal, it's not shielded, but it works pretty good for what we're trying to do here. So there's a tiny little connector in the back here that this goes on. Using another one, it's that guy right there. And fortunately, it's a very like a zero insertion force thing, makes it a lot easier on me. And then that goes right into the Pi. Probably doing this in the wrong order again. Maybe I should have left the... Okay, servos go on absolutely last. Make note of this, folks. Servos are problematic guys. They're always causing trouble. Damn servos. And then the FPC cable just slides in. Should get a satisfying click when it's in. Okay, that's in. And finally, you're like, what could possibly mean by finally? We need to add the keyboard. Now this is a cool keyboard. It's a little RF keyboard made by a company called Fabi, and I really like it because it's well built. It comes in a variety of colors. I like the green because it kind of goes with the BMO theme. I think the silver one works well too. There's a black one. I think there's a pink one. It has a little USB dongle that we need. So this works great because the front panel buttons just aren't enough. You could use the front panel USB ports for a mouse and keyboard, but this works a lot better because you got both in one here, and it frees you up for game pads and things. And now that our mean servos are out of the way, we can put this in. And this is why we needed the full-size USB port. There was no way around it. That's everything. I don't know if you can see all that, but there's a lot of stuff in there. So let's go back and get this. I think we're done, so we can now do the servos for the third time. And you can never connect servos too many times, apparently. Ready to sandwich. We call this the sandwiching maneuver. You're about to feel what a bunch of tiny little wires feel like when they really don't want to be crammed together. There is some pushback. These JST cables, even though they have a very thin gauge, still want to push back. Key is not to make sure nothing's getting pinched like this very long servo cable. Ta-da! And now we'll add these tiny little 1.6 screws. I prefer the 2mm screws, but just a little pinched on space for the inserts is the problem. Because there's no need for it. And survey says, make sure it snaps together. I believe we have success. So that is the base of everything. Look at that. The buttons are working. The only thing we have to do really aesthetically is add some details, and we will do that as well. There will be vinyl lettering. There will be some vinyl to hide the slot and make it look like it's an empty slot, and then the blue dot to hide the microphone port. Then we'll add arms and legs. So we can do that next.